On a cold winter night in Jacksonville, Florida, the streets lay quiet under the dim orange glow of tired street lamps. The air carried that sharp, damp chill that seeps into your bones, the kind of night where every sound feels louder, every shadow stretches just a little too far. It should have been like any other December evening, ordinary, unremarkable. But on this night, a mother's voice would cut through the stillness and shatter it. She is on the phone, clutching it so tight her knuckles are white. Her words tremble out, her breath short and uneven. She's speaking to the 911 operator, trying to form sentences while her mind races into dark, unthinkable places. Her daughter is missing. She didn't come home from school today. She's not at a friend's house. She hasn't called. She hasn't texted. And for this mother, that means only one thing. Something is terribly, irreversibly wrong. The missing girl is 16-year-old Ayanna Sawyer. By every account, Ayanna is the kind of teenager every parent dreams of raising. She's bright, brilliant, even top of her class, an honor student who never misses a day of school without reason. She's grounded, disciplined, the kind of kid who doesn't test boundaries recklessly. Her teachers adore her peers respect her, and her family depends on her in ways most 16-year-olds could never imagine. But Ayanna's life, even before this night, wasn't simple. She was 5 months pregnant, a secret she kept from most of the world, but not from her mother. In the Sawyer household, this wasn't a shame to hide. It was a reality to embrace. They had already chosen a name for the baby, Hazel Michelle. Ayanna still walked the same routine every afternoon, straight home from school, then over to the elementary to pick up her little brother. It was her responsibility, one she never failed to meet. And that is why her absence tonight isn't just worrying, it's unthinkable.
Jacksonville 911, what's the location of your emergency?
Did not come home from high school today. She goes to Turner Park High School. Her phone is going straight to voicemail. That is not like her.
Okay.
You have no idea what she is. So she come home every day because she got responsibility. She walked to the elementary with her sister to pick her brother up, and 5 months pregnant.
It's overwhelming them.
On the 911 call, her mother's voice cracks when she explains, "This isn't like Ayanna." She comes home every day, she says, as if saying it aloud might somehow rewind the day back to normal. She's pleading for someone to listen, to believe her, to act now before it's too late. The dispatcher asks questions, her school, her route, the last time anyone saw her. The answers only make the silence heavier. Jacksonville is no stranger to missing person reports. In a city this size, people vanish for all kinds of reasons. Runaways, family disputes, crimes of opportunity. But there's something different about this one. This isn't a troubled teen pushing boundaries. This is a girl with a life mapped out, a girl who, despite being a teenager, carried herself with the weight and steadiness of someone much older. And yet she has simply vanished. No fight with friends, no heated argument with family, no note left behind, no witnesses who saw her leave with anyone. Her phone is silent, its location dark. It's as though she stepped off the edge of the world in broad daylight. Her mother clings to the hope that maybe there's a misunderstanding. Maybe Ayanna is at a friend's house. Maybe she lost track of time. But deep down, she knows better. Parents know. They feel the shift, the fracture when something is truly wrong. And tonight, that feeling is gnawing at her like a cold wind in her chest. She remembers the last morning she saw her daughter. Ayanna was dressed neatly, her hair pulled back, her school bag slung over her shoulder. She kissed her mom goodbye, a fleeting gesture in the rush of a school morning. There was no sign, no hint in her smile or her eyes that this would be the last time she'd walk out that front door. Now, hours later, that image is frozen in her mind. The clock ticks past the point where there's any excuse for her absence. The rest of the family is calling her name into the night air, checking every place they can think of, neighbors' porches, the park down the street, the path she takes to school. Each unanswered call tightens the knot in their stomachs. On this quiet Jacksonville night, a mother stands in her living room staring at the front door, half expecting it to open. But it doesn't. And every passing minute feels like another door closing, one more opportunity slipping away. Somewhere out there, her daughter is alone, or worse, and she can't reach her. This is the moment the search begins, though no one knows yet just how deep and dark that search will go. In the hours ahead, suspicion will grow like a storm on the horizon. The list of possibilities will narrow. The shadows around Ayanna's life will lengthen. And the truth, when it finally surfaces, will be more monstrous than anyone could have imagined. But tonight, there is only the fear. The fear of not knowing. The fear of what might already be too late. and the question that will haunt everyone who loves Ayanna Sawyer from this moment forward. Who would want to harm a girl like her? Morning light in Jacksonville on December 19, 2018 was soft and pale, the kind that filters through winter clouds without ever quite warming the day. At Terry Parker High School, students were already moving through their late morning classes, the hum of routine filling the hallways. But for Ayanna Sawyer, that routine would end abruptly. At 11:00 a.m., cameras caught her leaving the school grounds alone. No friends trailing behind, no rush of footsteps, no anxious glance over her shoulder. She carried 2 bags. One was her usual school bag weighed down with books, notebooks, the artifacts of an honor student. The other was stranger, stuffed full, bulging with items from Victoria's Secret. The bright pink logo peeked out between the zipper teeth. It was the kind of bag you might carry after a shopping spree, not a morning in the middle of a school day. Where was she going with it, and why? The footage showed nothing else, no car pulling up into frame, no figure stepping out to meet her. Whoever she was with stayed just outside the reach of the camera's lens. From there, she simply disappeared from the school's view. When the missing person report came in, the first theory from investigators was almost textbook a runaway. A pregnant teenager, just 16 maybe, overwhelmed by the reality of what lay ahead. Maybe she'd left to be with the baby's father to escape the mounting pressure. In police case files, it's an easy box to tick. But for the people who knew her, the idea was almost insulting. Ayanna doesn't do that. Her mother insisted, her voice sharp with a certainty born from years of watching her daughter's discipline and responsibility. She wasn't reckless, she wasn't impulsive, and she wasn't careless, not with school, not with family, and certainly not with her own life. She had responsibilities she didn't just accept, but owned. Every afternoon, she picked up her younger brother from elementary school, walking him home without fail. She was the dependable one in the family, the one her mother could trust with the kind of everyday duties most teens tried to avoid. Pregnant or not, Ayanna was steady, reliable. And so if she wasn't where she was supposed to be, something had broken that pattern in a way she would never choose. The police kept asking questions, the same questions that implied maybe there was a side to her no one knew. Had she been upset lately? Did she talk about leaving? Did she have problems with her mother? But each answer from her family came back the same? No. For Kimberly, her mother, every hour without her daughter deepened the dread. Waiting for someone else to find answers wasn't an option. She began her own search, not just in the streets, but in the corners of Ayanna's life. Her bedroom was still as she'd left it, a half-empty glass of juice on the nightstand, clothes folded in the corner. Kimberly pulled open drawers, checked under the bed, ran her fingers along the edges of notebooks. Nothing. Then she sat down at Ayanna's laptop. The screen lit her face in the dim room. Kimberly opened the files one by one, homework assignments, class projects, music playlists. All ordinary. She was about to give up when instinct told her to check the recycle bin. And there it was. A single Word document recently deleted. She opened it. It wasn't an essay or a homework assignment. It was a stream of thoughts typed in bursts, as if Ayanna had been spilling her mind faster than she could edit herself. The sentences were raw, emotional at times, almost secretive in tone. They spoke of someone named Jose. There were no last names, no clear identifiers. Just Jose. A figure who appeared in every line like a shadow she couldn't escape. There were hints of closeness, of trust, of feelings that went deeper than casual friendship. Kimberly read and reread the lines, her stomach tightening with every pass. She had never heard of a Jose in her daughter's life. Not once. Ayanna's circle was small and familiar, family, classmates, a few close friends. And yet here was this man's name in her private words, threaded with emotions that felt too adult, too dangerous. What was he to her? The questions began tumbling faster than Kimberly could catch them. Was Jose the father of her unborn child? Was he the reason she'd left school that morning with 2 bags in hand? Did she plan to meet him, or was she meeting him because she had no choice? The police would later study that document closely, but in this moment for Kimberly, it was a doorway into a version of her daughter's life she had never known existed. And if Ayanna had felt she needed to hide this man's identity, if she had gone so far as to delete the file, then whatever connection they had was a dangerous one. The family's conviction hardened Ayanna hadn't run away. She'd been pulled away by someone she knew, someone she trusted, and now somewhere out there that someone was holding the answers to where she was and whether she was still alive. In the sterile logic of police procedure, missing persons are statistics. But in the Sawyer household, the lines on that Word document were not numbers. They were a thread, the first thread leading into a tangle of secrets that would soon unravel into something far darker than anyone could have imagined. And at the center of that tangle was a single name, Jose. In the early days of the investigation, police had a working theory. The mysterious Jose in Ayanna's deleted journal might be connected to someone in her past, someone who had already crossed dangerous lines with her. There was one name that made sense at first, a neighbor, an older man who had lived across the street. Months earlier, when Ayanna was just 15, that man had been caught in a sexual relationship with her. It had been confirmed through a DNA test. For detectives, it was an obvious lead. If he had been involved with her before, maybe he was back in the picture now. Maybe Jose was just a cover name to hide him. But as they dug into timelines and dates, the logic began to crack. The pregnancy didn't match. His involvement had ended long before conception. Friends said they'd drifted apart. And on the day Ayanna vanished, he had an alibi he was out of town. He was removed from the suspect list. That left the investigation with nothing but the name Jose and a girl who had walked out of school carrying 2 bags and never returned. The break came from an unexpected place, Ayanna's younger sister. She had been quiet during the first frantic days, answering questions, softly sticking close to her mother. But one evening, when the pressure of the mystery became too heavy, she spoke. Her words came hesitantly at first, as if saying them might make the situation even worse. "Jose isn't a boyfriend," she said. "It's Uncle John." The room went still. Uncle John. To the family, that name meant one person. Jonathan Quillis, husband of Ayanna's Aunt Naomi. He wasn't a blood relative, but he was family in every sense that mattered. He'd been at birthdays, at Sunday dinners, at family cookouts. He'd held the babies when they were small. He'd helped with school pickups, lent a hand when bills got tight, offered his place for the kids to spend weekends. He was trusted, safe, familiar. And yet, according to Ayanna's sister, he was the man her sister had been writing about in her private journal. The words hit Kimberly like a physical blow. In her mind, she could see Jonathan smiling at her across a dinner table, see him joking with the kids in the backyard, hear him offering to drive them somewhere if she was busy. She had let this man into her home, into her children's lives. And now the thought of him in the role her daughter's words described made her skin crawl. She needed to be sure she'd heard correctly. "Are you certain?" she asked her younger daughter, searching her face for doubt. But the girl's eyes didn't waver. She was certain.
They already
Jonathan's
had
public face had always been warm
from
and dependable.
Ayanna, collected
He worked
back
hard.
in March of 2018.
He was the guy you could call when
the
your car
original
battery
results
died,
had shown
or
DNA
when you
from
needed help
Kamar
moving
Humphrey,
furniture.
the boy she'd
He
once
laughed
had a
easily, told good
relationship
stories,
with.
and made
That
everyone
much
feel welcome.
made sense.
But beneath that,
There
if
was
her
something
daughter
else.
was telling the truth,
It was,
there was something
Jonathan
else.
Quillis. Jonathan
darkness that
was
had been
no
hiding in
longer
plain
just a
sight.
suspicious uncle.
A man
he was
who
now
could play the role of
confirmed match
protector
in a
while
case
secretly
involving
grooming a teenage
missing
girl in his
pregnant
own
teenager.
family. The
It had
image of
been
him
months
shifted in
since
Kimberly's
Ayanna
mind.
Sawyer vanished.
She remembered
The
times he'd
diary
shown up
had already
unexpectedly,
pulled
the way he
Jonathan
always seemed to
Quillis
know
into
where
the
the girls
picture.
were.
But now,
Little comments
detectives
that
were
had
ready
felt
to
harmless
go
at the
deeper.
time. Compliments
So
on
he
Ayanna's
knew
appearance,
why he
casual
was there,
touches on the
but
shoulder,
he was
now replayed in her
immediately
head
on
with a
the
sinister
offense.
edge.
So
The reality
he could save
crashed
his
over her
face.
in waves.
So she
If
supposedly
Jonathan was Jose, then
on,
Ayanna had been in
on the
danger
back
for
on the
far
wall
longer
with
than
it,
she had
like, oh, hold
realized.
on. But
This
then
wasn't a
again,
stranger's
as
crime.
you know,
This
time
wasn't a
passed,
bad
my
luck
wife
or
made
a
me
wrong
aware.
place, wrong
She
time.
never,
This was
she never
betrayal
stopped
from
them
inside the circle she trusted.
questioning them
Her
and
hands
stuff like
trembled
that.
as she reached for her phone.
Anyway,
She didn't hesitate. She called the police. The words came out fast, almost frantic. Her daughter's journal, the name Jose, the sister's revelation, the connection to Jonathan. She needed them to know now. She needed them to act before another day passed, before another opportunity to find her daughter slipped away. As she hung up, the reality settled in fully. She wasn't just looking for a missing child anymore. She was pointing a finger at a man she had once called family, a man who had sat at her table and held her trust. And if what she feared was true, he had taken that trust and used it as a weapon. Some betrayals you can't prepare for. This was one of them. And from this moment on, Kimberly knew the investigation wasn't about a faceless Jose anymore. It was about Jonathan Quillis, Uncle John, and the darkness she had never imagined was hiding behind his smile. The invitation to come down to the station wasn't framed as an arrest. It was casual, almost polite. Detectives often work that way in the early stages. They want to see how a person behaves when the walls aren't yet closing in. Jonathan Quillis agreed without hesitation. He walked into the interview room in neat work clothes, posture, easy face, opened the very picture of a man with nothing to hide. The first moments were cordial. He smiled, shook hands, even cracked a joke about how crazy it was that his name had come up at all. He played the role of the concerned uncle, flawlessly sympathetic to the family's pain, insistent that he wanted nothing more than to help find Ayanna. He recounted how close the family used to be, how much time the kids spent at his place, how he'd always been there when they needed him. On the surface, it was believable. But detectives aren't swayed by surface. They watch the hands, the eyes, the pauses. They listen for the slips. And in the first half hour, Jonathan gave them one. They asked him about the morning Ayanna disappeared, about what she might have taken with her. He mentioned her school bag, then almost too smoothly added that she'd brought along all her Victoria's Secret stuff. That alone was odd. Then he went further. Yeah, about 38 pairs. The words hung in the air like a sour note. 38 pairs. An oddly specific number, said without hesitation, as if he'd counted them himself. No normal uncle would know something like that. No normal uncle would even guess. And certainly not a man who, by his own account, hadn't been close to Ayanna in recent months. The detectives didn't react outwardly, no raised eyebrows, no exchanged glances, but the moment was logged, mentally underlined. This was more than a red flag. It was a flash of lightning in a storm they could already feel building. They pressed on, letting him keep talking. He spoke about Ayanna's supposed moodiness, hinted that she might have been seeing different guys, tried to paint a picture of a restless teenager capable of leaving on her own. It was a narrative shift, subtle but deliberate one that moved attention away from him and toward a portrait of Ayanna as unpredictable. But it was too smooth, too rehearsed. Detectives began threading in sharper questions. Where were you that morning? Who can confirm it? Have you had any contact with her recently? Jonathan stayed calm, his voice steady, his answers quick. He offered just enough detail to sound convincing, but not enough to box himself in. He was careful. Until they brought up the name Jose. He didn't flinch outright, but there was the smallest pause, a heartbeat's worth, before he launched into his explanation. He didn't know any Jose. He had no idea why Ayanna would write about someone by that name. He speculated maybe it was a made-up person, or maybe a boyfriend she was keeping secret from everyone. He spoke as if he was trying to help them solve a puzzle, not realizing that, to the detectives, his words were starting to sound like the walls of a trap he was building for himself. The conversation looped back to those Victoria's Secret items. This time the detectives probed gently, almost idly, as though it was a curiosity rather than a point of suspicion. Jonathan didn't seem to realize he'd already given them more than enough on that topic. From their standpoint, it was time to make things less friendly. They informed him they'd need a DNA sample, standard procedure, they said. He agreed without protest, trying to keep his mask of cooperation firmly in place. He swabbed his cheek, handed the sample over. In his mind, perhaps this was just another way to prove his innocence. But for the detectives, that swab was a fuse. If it matched anything they already had in evidence, it would change everything. As Jonathan left the room that day, still wearing the air of a man who'd done his part to help the detectives exchange their first real look of the session, a silent acknowledgement that they'd just crossed an invisible threshold. The number 38 was still ringing in their heads. And they knew this interview hadn't cleared Jonathan. It had placed him squarely in the center of the storm. The second time Jonathan sat in the interview room, the atmosphere was nothing like the first. Gone was the casual, almost friendly air from his earlier visit. This time the walls felt closer, the air heavier. The detectives didn't waste time with small talk. They had something they hadn't had before, a scientific fact that cut through every story, every deflection, I don't know. They started steady asking about his relationship with Ayanna, about the last time he'd seen her. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, his voice flat and rehearsed. He denied, sidestepped, redirected. I've told you before, he said. I don't know where she is. I don't know what happened to her. The lead detective let the silence stretch before speaking again. Jonathan, we have your DNA. Her voice was calm, almost gentle, but the weight in the words was unmistakable. Your DNA was found on Ayanna's underwear. He shifted in his seat. Just a flicker, a small readjustment of posture, like a man suddenly aware of how he's sitting. He tried to recover quickly. That's not possible. I don't know how that could happen. Maybe it got transferred somehow. He started talking about shared laundry, about the kids being around his house, about how things could get mixed up. It was a weak answer, and he knew it. The detective leaned in, slightly lowering her voice as if confiding in him. Jonathan, I understand you care about your family. I understand you've done things you're not proud of, but science doesn't lie. And science says you were there. He bristled. No, I wasn't. I've never... Look at me, she interrupted, her tone sharper now. We have your DNA. That's not opinion. That's not rumor. That's fact. You can't erase it. You can't explain it away. So I'm asking you, look me in the eye and tell me the truth. For the first time, his eyes faltered. He glanced away toward the table, toward the door, anywhere but her face. His hands came together on the tabletop, fingers interlacing tightly. He squeezed them until the knuckles went pale. She softened her tone again. You're not a monster, Jonathan. I don't believe you woke up that morning planning to hurt her, but something happened, didn't it? Something you didn't expect. He swallowed hard. You've got it wrong, I'm telling you. You're telling me stories, she cut in. You're telling me anything except the truth. The second detective stepped in now, playing the part of the reasonable man. You know, the longer you wait to explain this, the worse it's going to look. Right now, we've got evidence and no explanation. That's not a good place for you to be. Jonathan's breathing changed shorter, heavier pulls of air, like each inhale was fighting to get past the pressure building in his chest. His face had lost some of its color. He tried one more angle, pointing fingers at others. You should be talking to that guy across the street. Or maybe something happened when she was staying at someone else's place. I don't know, but it wasn't me. But the detectives weren't on biting. They circled back again and again to the same point, the DNA. Every denial, every deflection only made the contrast sharper. The more he talked, the more obvious it became he was running out of places to hide. The lead detective let the silence hang until it felt like a weight in the room. Then she spoke slow and deliberate. Jonathan, this is the moment. You can keep lying to me or you can tell me what really happened. One of those choices might give you a chance, the other will bury you. His eyes stayed fixed on the table now, the lines on his forehead deepening. His hands, still knotted together, shifted just enough to betray the tremor in his fingers. The air between them was tight, electric. The evidence had already spoken. Now it was a matter of whether Jonathan would too. And every breath he took sounded like it was costing him more than the last. In the sterile, echoing corridors of the county jail, conversations have a way of carrying. But in Jonathan Quillis's case, the detectives didn't want to rely on chance. They needed him to talk, and they knew from experience that some men, when stripped of freedom and surrounded by other inmates, can't resist the urge to open their mouths. So they planted someone. A trusted informant, a man who could blend in, earn Jonathan's confidence, and coax from him the kind of truths he'd never speak to a badge. The setup was simple: share meals, spend time in the day room, talk about life on the outside, and see what slips. At first, Jonathan was cautious. He talked about his job at the salvage yard, about his wife, about how he thought the police had it in for him. But as the days passed, his guard began to soften. The informant nodded in all the right places, never pushing too hard, letting Jonathan steer the conversation. Then late one night, in the low hum of the tier, Jonathan leaned in just a little closer. His voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. You know, he said, that girl, she was pregnant. Might have been mine. The words hung there heavy. He didn't look for a reaction. He just kept going. She started talking about telling people. You know what that would do to me, to my family, to my life. His tone wasn't angry. It was matter of fact, the way someone might describe a problem that needed solving. There was only one way out of that. And then, with the kind of calm that makes your skin crawl, he laid it out. He said he told her to meet him at work. Not in the front lot where there were cameras and other people, but in a back section of the yard. It was a place he knew well, a dead zone for surveillance, shielded by rows of rusting cars and the constant grind of heavy equipment. Nobody could hear anything back there, he said. Too much noise. She came like he knew she would. They talked for a moment, maybe longer. But then he moved. His hands went to her throat. She fought, he admitted. Harder than I thought she would. He described the panic in her eyes, the sounds she made, half breath, half plea, as he squeezed. But it wasn't working. She was still fighting, clawing, refusing to go limp. I couldn't finish it that way, he said, almost as if the failure irritated him. So he pulled out the gun, one quick shot to the chest. She went quiet after that, he murmured. There was no pause in his story, no moment of regret. He moved straight into logistics, explaining how he carried her to the dumpster. Not just any dumpster, he picked one he knew would be hauled off quickly. He even mentioned the truck number, confident in his knowledge of the yard's schedule. Once she was inside, covered by the refuse of the day, he closed the lid and walked away. To him, that was the end. Problem solved. The informant didn't interrupt. He let Jonathan's words paint the picture. And in those words was the entire anatomy of the crime, the planning, the control over the setting, the cold calculation of disposal. Jonathan never raised his voice. He didn't boast. But there was a certainty in his tone, the kind of certainty that comes from believing you've done the only thing you could do. To him, this wasn't a confession, it was a justification. Outside that cell, when the recording reached the hands of the detectives, the air in the room changed. They had heard speculation before, they had heard denials. But this was Jonathan Quillis telling the story in his own words, stripped of the polish he used in interrogation. It was suffocating to listen to each detail, another nail in the coffin of his defense. And for anyone hearing it, the mind couldn't help but reconstruct the moment, the secluded yard. The mechanical roar masking a struggle, the flash of a gun, the thud of a young girl's body hitting the cold metal floor of a dumpster. This wasn't just evidence. It was the crime itself spoken in the darkness by the man who committed it. And once those words existed outside the walls of that cell, there was no taking them back. The Otis Road landfill stretched out like a grim, endless wasteland, a landscape of human waste piled into mountains, reeking under the winter sun. For most people, it was a place to avoid a final stop for what the world no longer wanted. But for the investigators searching for Ayanna Sawyer, this was the place where hope might still be hiding, or dying. They had to lead Jonathan's own words to his brother, and later to a jailhouse confidant about putting her body in a specific dumpster at the salvage yard where he worked. They'd traced that dumpster's journey from the yard to here to this place where trash was swallowed whole and buried forever. It was a narrow window of possibility. If they were going to find her, this was the only chance they would have. The search began with heavy machinery, massive excavators with jaws like prehistoric beasts clawing into the mounds and peeling back layers of refuse. Each scoop brought up not just garbage, but the stench of rot and chemicals so strong it seemed to cling to your skin. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of decay and the faint hum of flies. Investigators wore protective suits and masks, but nothing could block it out completely. Side by side with the machines worked the K9 unit's dogs trained to detect the scent of human remains. Their handlers moved carefully, scanning the disturbed piles for any sign, any shift in the dog's behavior that might signal they'd found her. Every time a dog paused, noses twitching, the crew would stop the machinery and dig by hand. Gloves scraped through plastic fabric paper and things better left unnamed. Each pause brought a flicker of hope, and each false alarm cut a little deeper. Days turned into nights. Searchlights illuminated the heaps when the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that made the landfill look even more like some desolate alien terrain. The workers rotated shifts, their boots sinking into the soft, unstable ground. They moved methodically, charting every section they'd combed through, determined to leave nothing unturned. The cost of the search climbed into the millions, but for Ayanna's family, there was no price too high. They came to the site at times standing just beyond the safety barriers, watching as strangers waded through the filth in the hope of bringing their girl home. Kimberly, her mother, stood bundled in a coat against the wind, a scarf pulled tight over her mouth, but her eyes never left the workers. She didn't care about the smell, the danger, the mess her daughter might be here somewhere beneath their feet. Every time a load of debris was dropped onto the sorting tables, her heart would race. Maybe this was it. Maybe she was finally coming home. But every time the answer was no. No trace of Ayanna. No piece of clothing that could be hers. No body. The absence was suffocating. To search this hard and find nothing felt like losing her all over again. On the 10th day, when the crew called another halt with no new discovery, Kimberly's composure cracked. She pressed her hands to her face and sobbed, her voice breaking through the landfill's mechanical grind. "She deserves to come home," she cried. "She's just a baby. She deserves to be home." It wasn't just grief, it was fury. Fury at the man who had taken her daughter, fury at the universe for letting a body vanish into a sea of garbage, fury at the helplessness of it all. By the end of the 3rd week, the search team had dug through an estimated 80 feet of compacted waste in the sector where that dumpster's load should have been. They found scraps of clothing, but nothing they could definitively tie to Ayanna. No body, no closure.
They already had
the decision to end the search came like a slow, reluctant
collected
surrender.
back in March of
the
2018.
landfill was swallowing them,
The
and the odds
original
of recovery
results
were
had
now
shown
almost
DNA from
non-existent.
Kamar Humphrey.
But
the
for
boy
Kimberly,
she'd
the
once had
absence
a
of a body
relationship
didn't
with.
mean the absence
That
of truth.
much made sense.
She knew what had happened
there
to
was
her
something
daughter.
else.
She knew who had done it.
It was Jonathan
and she knew that whether
Quillis.
Ayanna was found
Jonathan
or not, justice
was
would
no
have to speak
longer
for her.
just a suspicious
Still, as she left
uncle.
Otis Road
He
that
was now
final
a
day, she
confirmed
turned back
match
toward
in a
the
case
heaps of
involving
trash
a
one last
missing
time.
pregnant teenager.
Her voice was
It
barely
had
above a
been
whisper,
months
but the
since
words were
Ayanna
sharp
Sawyer
as glass.
vanished. The diary had
I'm
already
bringing you
pulled
home, baby
Jonathan
girl.
Quillis into
One
the
way
picture,
or another, I'm bringing you
but
home.
now
The
Detectives were
courtroom in
ready
Duval
to go
County was
deeper.
heavy with anticipation
So
that
he
September
knew
morning
why he was
in
there, but
2023.
he was immediately on
Every
the offense.
seat was filled family
so
reporters,
he could
strangers,
save his face.
drawn by the
So
gravity of the
she
case.
supposedly was
At the center
on like
sat
on the
Jonathan
back on
Quillis,
the
dressed
wall
in a
with
suit
it, like, oh,
that
hold
couldn't
on.
disguise
But
the
then
weight of what he
again,
carried.
as you know, time passed,
His
my
eyes
wife
shifted
made me aware.
occasionally toward the
She
jury,
never,
but never lingered.
she never
Over the
stopped
course of
them
the trial, the
from,
prosecution had built their
questioning
case
them
like
and stuff like that.
tightening
But
chains.
anyway,
Witness after witness stepped forward. Ayanna's sister recounting the truth about Jose, her mother reliving the discovery of the journal, forensic experts explaining the DNA match that erased all doubt. Then came the text messages, possessive, manipulative, dripping with control. The journal entries were read aloud. Ayanna's own words bringing her back into the room. The jury heard about the pregnancy, about the secrecy, about the fear she tried to put into sentences. And then, like the final blow, the jailhouse recordings. Jonathan's voice, casual yet incriminating, describing the very acts he had spent years denying. It was as if the walls he'd built for himself had been dismantled brick by brick, each piece of evidence fitting neatly into place. The defense tried to fracture the narrative, casting doubt on timelines suggesting alternative explanations for the DNA, questioning the reliability of certain witnesses. But it was like trying to hold back a flood with bare hands. The weight of the evidence was relentless, and it all pointed in one direction. When the verdict came, the room seemed to hold its breath. Guilty of first-degree murder of Ayanna Sawyer. Guilty of first-degree murder of her unborn child. Guilty of battery against a minor. No hesitation, no ambiguity. Jonathan sat still, face expressionless, but the verdict had stripped away whatever illusion of control he'd maintained. The judge's voice carried clearly as he delivered the sentence: 3 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. There would be no second chance, no eventual freedom. This was where Jonathan's story ended, behind the walls of a prison cell. Across the aisle, Ayanna's family collapsed into tears. Kimberly clutched the hands of those beside her, her sobs a mixture of heartbreak and release. Justice had been served, but it was a hollow kind of victory. No verdict could bring Ayanna back, no sentence could erase the years stolen from her life or the child she never had the chance to hold. Still, there was solace in knowing the man who had taken her from them would never hurt another girl. The courtroom emptied slowly, the echoes of the gavel lingering in the air. For the Sawyer family, the fight was over. The mourning they knew would never end. Justice does not always arrive in the form people expect. Sometimes there is no recovered body, no final scene of closure. Sometimes justice emerges from the very mouth of the guilty, from the moments they cannot stop themselves from speaking, from the confessions they never meant to give. In Ayanna Sawyer's case, the truth came in fragments: a slip of the tongue in an interrogation, a whispered boast in a jail cell, a brother's unwilling witness. Ayanna is gone. Her child is gone. Their absence will echo in the lives of those who loved them for the rest of their days. But her story, carved into court transcripts and burned into the memories of all who followed it, will not vanish. She is more than the way she died. She is the young woman who dreamed of a future in medicine or law, who carried her responsibilities with quiet pride, who was loved fiercely by her family. As the screen fades, her smiling face fills the frame, eyes bright, frozen in a moment, untouched by what was to come. A candle's flame flickers in the dark, casting a gentle glow. Words appear slowly, each one deliberate: justice for Ayanna Sawyer. It is not just a statement, it is a vow that her name will be spoken, her life remembered, and her justice honored for as long as the story is told.